So it's funny, we got these cams that we designed, way back, and they're still running, record fast times now. The B and the H cams, I would say the biggest issue is room for the valve spring. Like we made a really good valve spring along with Peterson spring, almost 20 years at this point, and the most lift you can get out of a B is probably about 550, and that's the limit. So it's sort of like I can't really make it any more aggressive if I can't make it taller. You know what I'm saying?
You don't you're not in a position to shrink down the base circle to add lobe lift. Do you care about lobe speed?
It the base circle wouldn't shrink it that much. It's more like the physical space that you have to put that spring and the wire thickness and the diameter that you need in order to get enough spring force to control everything. There just isn't much room there. Like
So
five
people
feet.
never put long valves in them and shrunk the base circle up because that's what you would do in a domestic engine. You would you cheat it that way. You'd move to a longer valve so you have a taller installed height. Then you move the cam diameter down. You sacrifice the speed the speed in which the face of the tappet is facing, and you just take your lift because you need it.
Yeah, I could certainly do that, but where I would get stuck is what valve spring. Because it's not like I. These are really short valve springs with a lot of travel relative to their length. You know, and so we could take coils out of it, give it more travel, but then you're just increasing the stress of the spring
Yeah.
when you change the pitch or you remove coils and you start pulling the pitch farther apart. So the issue with the B is really the valve spring at this point. Like, yeah, I could do those things. Like I could make the base circle smaller, right? Put a longer valve in there, but then what spring do I have? Because the spring with the most travel that I can find is our spring, you know. But if I make it longer, then my installed pressures are going to go down. Everything's just going to get softer from the go. So I don't know where the limits are for controlling the weight, you know,
Yeah.
how much spring. And so it's like, do I, can I figure it out? Of course I can figure it out. Like, can we make better stuff? Of course we can make better stuff. Is there any point to do it?
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. I don't remember what year it was, but I had some Skunk 2 cams and just off the shelf valvetrain, and the engine really would live well. We would turn it 10,000, and it was. I don't remember exactly how we had terrible short track, but it went like 188 miles an hour with a 7285. That was, I mean, it had to be over a decade ago. And the power was one thing, but the fact that the valve train lived was cool because when you when I came into that program, they kept throwing the valves out of the car, and I just changed the rev limiter strategies to where it would soften up when the guy put it in the wrong gear or missed a shift or whatever, shaking the tires, and the valve train lived in the vehicle really well, which I thought. I didn't even really know your brand back then, but it was impressive that the little engine would do what it was doing and not need to be worked on a lot in the valve train.
Yeah, the B stuff and the H stuff, just because I'm limited by the lift, I really can't open it that aggressive. Do you see what I'm saying? Like if I
Can you
wanted to go
can you
aggressive,
go into that a little bit? There's a certain tie to lift and duration, and how the lobe can't be a square. The lobe has to be a shape that um, you're as you come off the base circle and you get to the heel and you're on the take up ramp and you're headed towards max lift. There's some rules of engagement there to not upset the system too much, and we touched on it when I was out at your place a month ago, and it really seems like you have a good grasp on all that. So could you teach us something?
all right. So if I have a lift curve like this, right, If I want to make it more aggressive, I essentially have to go up straighter, right? But in order for me to go up straighter, I need to be able to catch it up here. So it has to go taller. As I go aggressive, I have to go tall. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'm creating a cam like this that isn't necessarily that much better because in order for you to pull the sides up, you need to lift her. I'll show you a picture. Maybe this is kind of a preview of our next conversation because like
Okay.
this time I'm just kind of giving you a summary like background information, but this is where I would go to answer your question. Um, First of all, I don't like this idea of stages, but that's how our industry is set up. You know, I would rather we just separate camshafts by 10-degree duration increments because that's what changes where the RPM is going to be in the engine, right? So if you look at this is my valve lift on this side, and then this is my duration down here. And then this here is an acceleration rate. So if you look here, these essentially all have the same acceleration, but they're 242, 252, 268, 282, right? And then the lift is just the natural, right? So if you have the small one like this, then you got the little bit bigger one, a bigger one. The lift has to go up because if I'm over here and then I make the lift short, I'm no longer am I making something very aggressive. I'm making something more like that. You can't cap the lift. Like if you want to maintain the accelerations, the lift has to go along with the duration, right? Because they're all the same. They're essentially all this this part of the curve is all kind of the same. And this would be the ramp, right? This this section in here would be the ramp, and that determines the whole shape of the side.
I've watched some of the Spintron videos of upset valve trains, and as the parts accelerate, it's worse on a pushrod engine, but on an overhead cam engine, you touched on the spring length, and you touched on max lift, and earlier before we hopped on, we were talking about the Coyote, and I can see that valve spring in my head, that big tall valve spring that has all that room to dampen uh, the camshaft, and you're working with a set of limitations with this with the Honda B. When you go, can we jump to the K for a minute?
Sure.
How much more advanced is the valve train on the K? How much easier is it to get the performance out of it compared to the B?
Well, the the K drag race stuff, people are all running 650 plus lift, right? So that's already 100,000 more lift than what you can squeeze out of a B. You know,
Is that mostly because of the roller rocker?
of why we can get the lift.
Yeah. Does the rocker arm influence that? Going back to your camshaft duration and lift, how much does the rocker arm, the Honda B having the pad versus the Honda K having the roller, does that influence how quickly you can accelerate the valve open, or you're going back to the same duration is duration, lift is lift. They're just traveling buddies.
There's obviously going to be different limits for the rolling system versus a sliding system. The sliding system, you have different contact stresses, right? So you have sliding, and then you have like uh, odd pressure angles too as the rocker arm starts going down. That can cause all sorts of problems. The roller just more forgiving because it doesn't really have that pressure angle problem. It's just rolling, right? So it's not like a V8 cam where you got the cams just sitting on top of a roller that moves in axial motion. It's not like that. In the Hondas, it's an oscillating arm. So where are the limits of a sliding system? You'd have to find that on the Spintron. You'd have to put the right spring in there, put the right oil in there, spin it how you're going to spin it to see if it's going to last or if it's going to wear out. In terms of how they look, earlier you mentioned I see the ramps and they're different now. They look better. I can tell you that on a sliding follower, you end up more with this type of cam shape, right? And then with a roller rocker, you get more of this type of cam shape. So this weird shape that you see in all the B stuff is literally a byproduct of the slider radius.
Is that akin to lifter diameter?
No, no, these shapes are unique to oscillating arm systems,
Okay.
right? You have something that's working just, the roller is always going to be on the same axis or the tappet's always going to be on the same axis. So you have like pressure angle problems when your lifter can only move in one axis,
Okay.
right?
When did
Because
you
pressure.
when
Hmm?
did you really start learning a lot? Who where was the aha moment? How many
Okay,
years did it
so
take to get where you're at?
maybe this will be. I think I'll leave today at this last part, and we can segue into it next time and really dig into like the details of the technical stuff. I'm just trying to give you like my background as to like all the mistakes that I made along the way and learning the hard way and learning by luck and learning by meeting the right old guy to teach you the right thing. Well, I met the right old guy, right? And that story goes, okay. So I wanted to do stuff for the K camshaft, right? This was early 2000 when the RSX engine just came out, right? I believe RSX came out in '00, right? And so I asked Jim Dewar over at Megacycle. I was like, "Hey, Jim's like, can you design some profiles for me?" And I was like a broken record, squeaky wheel gets the grease. And at the time, see, he was doing stuff for like Sears Baking and like so the pro stock NASCAR, he had it covered, and then he was doing all the camshafts for. Remember when Cannondale tried to come out with a motocross motorcycle?
Yeah, I remember that.
He did all that stuff, right? So he was up to his eyeballs. He got a new cam grinder in, like he got a Landis LT1 or whatever cam grinder in. So he was busy, and so I said, "Can you do these camshafts for me?" And he goes, "I'm really busy with all this other stuff. I can't do the camshafts for you, and I know you've been real patient. I will refer to I will refer you to people that can do the camshaft design for you." Right? I had no intention of being a camshaft designer at this point. Right? I was okay with relying on experts, designers to design my stuff. Right? So he gave me a list of people. I forgot all the. It was like four people on the list, and I called them up. Each one was like, "Yeah, yeah, I can do it." The first two or three people was like, "Yeah, no problem, we can do it." And then the fourth person was Harvey Crane. And he's a real interesting, very straightforward, very direct guy. He goes, "Well, I'm not gonna design a cam for you." but I'll teach you how to design it. And my ears perked up like, what? You're going to teach me how to design camshafts? Like, that's an offer I couldn't refuse. Right. And he goes, but it'll cost you. He's like, this is how it works. I won't design the camshaft for you, but if you come in and take my class, you get the software package, which is $6,000, but you get an hour of my time for every $100. So that was the initial package. I bought the software suite for $6,000, and I had 60 hours of his time, right? And I sent them the money, like, cashier's check, money order, like the very next day. And he was like pretty surprised. He's like, yeah, usually like I throw that out there right away because that's usually enough to deter most of the people that want to waste my time, It's like, and so that's how I started. He's just like, okay, I got your money, so let's arrange a time you can come out to, we do it in my hangar because the Spruce Creek flying community in
Yeah, I know where that
Daytona.
is.
So he lived at Spruce Creek with all the NASCAR drivers and all that. They fly in and out of that neighborhood, right? And he goes, well, you can come in my house. I got a hangar in the back. It's like, you got a hangar in the back? It's like, I got a hangar in the back, and that's where I teach my classes. And he goes, I only teach half a day. So class starts at 8. We're done at 12. And then if you want to go on a walk with me to walk the dogs or whatever, then we can do that. And then we'll call it a day. And so I went out to Florida for 3 weeks initially to learn from Harvey. And it was funny because within the first few hours of that first day, it became pretty clear I just needed to purge my brain of anything I thought I knew about camshafts, which was very little at that point. I probably knew more than most people that claim that they know camshafts now, but still, like relative to him, it was just sort of like, oh, I need to completely wipe out whatever lexicon is in my head now because he's using things in a very different, very specific way. Like just something as simple as a ramp. All right. How many people can define a ramp? Like everybody's got a different definition of a ramp. So here I'll show you an example of this. Camshaft profile terms, right? So this is somebody telling us a camshaft that looks like this. We got clearance ramp, closing ramp, opening ramp. And then we have another one that says closing ramp, closing flank, nose, opening flank, and ramp. So what is it? Is it flank or is it ramp? Right? So for when somebody says, oh, aggressive ramp, I'm like, which part of the camshaft are you talking about? Are you talking about this because it looks fat? You think it's aggressive, right? But we already said that, like, if you have a slider versus if you have a roller, yeah, of course this is going to look more aggressive, but it's not necessarily more aggressive because you're looking at this thing thinking it's an aggressive ramp. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This is not the ramp. This is the ramp. That is the ramp.
Yeah, that's where I see the trouble on some of those GZ cams right there. It just stamps them right there.
Yeah.
Right into the corner of the bucket.
It's the ramp.
Yeah.
Right. But see, here's the thing about the ramp is, so if this was our valve profile and this was the ramp, right? Believe it or not, this shape here is actually what drives the remainder of the lift curve.
Right.
So the ramp is hyper critical. Like how you design the ramp is super critical because it literally it sets up the next part. You know what I'm saying? So if you had a ramp that was more like this, as opposed to a ramp like this, you could clearly see the difference. It's literally a ramp, like a skateboard ramp, like a launch ramp.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So
follow you there.
So when I hear somebody say aggressive ramp, it's sort of like, well, how do you know how aggressive this is? You can't see it with your eyes, right? This stuff happens probably most of the ramp design probably happens between like 10. So like the next time we talk about this, like I guess I really want to get more into the meat of the tech stuff. I'm just sort of doing more of the setup stuff in terms of how it evolved with the B and the hard facing, and we've touched on some interesting things in terms of like lobe shapes and how the slipper lobe versus a roller lobe have completely different shapes, and you can't judge anything because you don't know what the valve's doing, right? That's the ultimate thing is the camshaft doesn't tell you exactly what the valve's doing. You have to look at what the valve's doing. The engine only sees what the valve is doing. Part of this process is, Jamie's car will be proof of concept for a lot of new stuff that I'm doing. I believe we will completely reset people's expectations of what the paradigm is.